everyone out there in Banjo land, Mike Hedding here. I've just got a free banjo lesson for you this week. We're going to work on the basics of ear training. So again, hearing how to pick out different notes of the scale and hear how that relates to the root home chord that we're playing. And this is super important stuff if you ever have wanted to be able to pick out a melody by ear and find it on your instrument, or you want to learn how to improvise. Again, you have to know how to hear those degrees of the scale and know how to basically manipulate them to get the sounds that you want. So I have a bunch of basic exercises. This is going to be kind of a beginner lesson. We're just going to dip our toe into the water. This is a huge topic, and again, you could have a whole bunch of lessons just on this one topic, but this is just going to be kind of an intro lesson to get you started, get you familiar with the basics of ear training, and really just give you hopefully some confidence that you can do it. I think this is one of those skills that it's easy to kind of write off as like you were either born with it or you weren't, but I really strongly believe this is a skill you can practice, and the sooner you get practicing it, the better, and I think you'll see some improvement with practice. All right, let's jump into these ear training exercises. All right, let's start breaking down this lesson. It's going to have some ear training exercises. So first, let's get our movable major scale down, and then we can start talking about the different degrees of the scale, which is really important to understanding ear training, is hearing those different degrees of the scale. So let's start in the key of C, because it's just a good key to start with. It's got no flats or sharps. You know, on piano, it's all the white keys make up the scale. So we're going to start with our first finger of our left hand on the 5th fret of the 3rd string. That's our C note. So that's our root note, or sometimes called the 1. So we're going to give each scale note a number 1 through 7, and that's going to help us with our ear training. So our C in this case is our 1. Our second note is D, the 7th fret on the 3rd string. Third note is E, 5th fret, 2nd string. And don't worry about what fingers you're using with your right hand at first. We can talk about that in a second. And then 4th note is F, 6th fret. And then we're going to slide up your 2nd finger up to 8, and that's a G note. That's our 5th note. And then we have 7th fret on the 1st string with our 1st finger. That's our 6th note, A. Then we have our 7th note, 9th fret, B. And then we're back to our 1, C. So we have 1 to 1 is our octave. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And that's one good movable pattern that I like to do, is you basically do the shift right here. Shift. And then you can go back down. So that's a good way to do it. You can also do it this way. Grab this note, instead of shifting here, grab it right here, same note, and then shift up. So there's a lot of ways to play these scales, but what I really want you to focus on for this lesson is the number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just get those numbers in your head. Okay, so what we're going to do to practice this, because I think just playing the notes on their own is good practice. Getting that scale, running it up and down is really good practice. But remember, music and notes, they're all contextual. So it matters what chord is being played underneath, because the notes can be used in different ways depending on what the underlying chord is. So let's pop on a C vamping track that's just going to play a C, and then we can start to play along and hear those different notes and how they fit together. Okay, so I'm going to pop on my C vamping track, and I'll include these with the lesson as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that scale up and down and really listen and cue into how each of those notes sound against the C chord, or with the C chord underneath. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I might just start by playing the notes to hear how they sound. now in hearing if I can hear those notes. So what are we doing there? One, we're just hearing how all those notes sound with the underlying chord. And what I want you to practice and start to come up with is seeing if you can pick out what number of the scale it is without kind of looking. Because I really want you to practice hearing how those notes sound against the C chord. It's really, really important, is because then when you hear a recording with a jump that plays that certain interval, you'll be able to cue and pick it up. So it's really important. So what I recommend is kind of giving, and it sounds kind of weird, but give each note like a feeling. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else, but you know, if the note kind of has a jazzier feel or feels like it wants to pick you up or bring you down, again, it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else as long as you can kind of recognize that feeling that particular note gives you. And a lot of times what I'm doing is hearing how it relates to the root note. But what's really good about this is once we get it down, we can start changing the notes and again give the song a different flavor. So let me put it back on, and I'll start by playing the major chords, and then I might change a note to make it a minor sound, just to kind of experiment with how those notes sound. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1. So the 1, 3, and 5 is really safe notes as well. Those are your chord tones. That one has a really jazzy feel to me, that 7. So now maybe let me flatten the 3rd and I'll make it minor. Flattening the 7th, which makes it bluesy. Oh, back to major. Hear that flatted, or the 3rd versus the flatted 3rd? That's a good one to hear. That's happy, and you got spooky. So I slide that up. So here the 3rds versus the flatted 3rd is really good. Flatted 7th versus regular 7th. You got 6, 5, 4, 3, 4. So you can hear, again, I'm just playing around, and you're going to have to throw a lot of stuff at the wall. I don't expect you to just immediately be able to come up with interesting ideas. But what we're really practicing is hearing how all those notes sound against the chord. You could hear I was flattening the 3rd note, so 1, 2, 3. Flattening means lowering the pitch a half step. So that's how you get the minor notes. The flatted 7th, you've heard it, that's a bluesy sound. So instead of the major 7th, which is kind of like a jazzier, you got the flatted 7th, which is a bluesier sound. So again, if you can know these little tips of flatten the 3rd will make it minor, flatten the 7th will make it bluesy. Knowing that in your mind is really powerful, but then also being able to hear it, hear that flatted 7th note. I kind of think of it in terms of tension. You know, that flatted 7th really has a lot of tension, where the major 7, you know, has, again, more of like a jazzy, kind of spacey feel to me. And again, just make up your own terms to describe the sounds you're hearing. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. But when I hear that, I kind of think of a spacey jazz sound versus the dominant 7th is a bluesier sound. Okay? So again, you can use this to find melodies, but what I really want you to practice is hearing how those notes sound and also just getting comfortable playing notes against a chord. You know, if you hit a note that's not in the scale, it's easy to get a little nervous and have to immediately jump off right away. But what I want you to practice too is kind of embracing a note that doesn't work with the chord and really kind of owning it, and then finding the ones around it that do work. So then you're not so nervous if you accidentally hit a wrong note. It's not the end of the world. Part of what we're working on is getting familiar if you hear the sound of a wrong note. Again, that's really good practice. You'll know not to hit that note next time, but you have to hear what it sounds like in your head, otherwise you're not going to know it's a wrong note. Okay, let's modulate up. So let's move this up to the 7th fret and start our same scale. This would be now in the key of D. So now we have 2 sharps, and you don't have to remember this, but it would be good practices. So we have 1, 2, 3. Now this note is sharp, so we have an F sharp. Now our 4 note is our G. In C, our G was a 5 note, was the 5th note of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A lot of these notes and scale ideas, it depends on what the underlying chord is. So if the underlying chord is a C, your G note is the 5 chord. In D, it's the 4 chord. So it's going to have a very different sound. The G note in the key of D is going to have a different sound than the G note in the key of C. So again, all these notes are always contextual. So it always matters what the chord underneath is, and that's where you're finding these numbers. So let's try that same idea now in the key of D. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which would be an F note. Slide it up to the regular 3rd, you get major. Scale patterns. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this. And what I want you to really, and I keep mentioning this over and over again, don't worry too much about what notes you're playing or what runs you're doing. I really just want you to get comfortable hearing how those notes sound, even if you're staying on one that isn't in the scale at all. Maybe let me put the vamping track on again, and I'll play a note that's definitely not in the scale. Here we go. That sounds pretty funky, right? So that's the flatted 2nd note. Again, it's definitely not in the scale. And what I want you to practice is 2 things. 1 is hearing how outside of the scale that sounds. And 2, just getting comfortable playing that note against a note or a chord that doesn't technically work. That it really helps to build up your confidence if you can play notes that aren't in the scale, but you can kind of own them confidently. Again, you're going to want to always correct those notes in the future, but if you get so nervous that you're going to hit a wrong note, that it can really impede your progress if you're so worried about hitting a wrong note that you just never kind of go and explore. What I want you to practice is really owning those notes. And again, if you hit a totally wrong note, that's fine. That's what I kind of want you to practice owning that, okay? Let's move on to the key of A. This will be good practice. So again, we can do it down here. Let's go down to our 2nd fret on the 3rd string. So this time we have 3 sharps. So we have our C sharp instead of regular C. We have D, E, we have F sharp, we have G sharp, and we have A. So we have C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. And this is, again, a perfect example of now our G note that we were talking about in C and D. In C, it was our fifth note, right? In D, it was our fourth note. In A, it's not even in our scale. It's the flatted seventh note in our scale. So again, all of these notes can be used over different chords, but it's just going to be a different number in the scale. And if you can pick up that, you can use that to your advantage. Okay, if I want to play a bluesy sounding lick in the key of A, let me really highlight that flatted seventh or the third to flatted third idea. Again, you can start kind of using these little tools to create sounds that you're looking for. So let me pop on the A vamping track, and again, I'll play it with the major scale and then start incorporating those other tones.
1, 2, 3, 4.
I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. You could try doing some jumps. Maybe I try jumping from 1 to 6. 1 to 5, what does that sound like? Or 1 to 4, what does that sound like? Or 1 to 3. Let me start adding that G so you can hear how that sounds. I'll go back to the major 7. We can make it minor. Let's try it again.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So instead of the major third, I'll do minor third. Do we get it like an A minor sound? Let's hit a note again outside of the chord. I'll mention about this ear training stuff is, again, it's kind of a little secret in music, is that there's actually never really two bad notes in a row. So let's say I hit that fourth fret in my A chord on the second string, which is a really funky note according to that chord, right? Doesn't sound very good. But again, there's never two bad notes in a row. So let's say I hit the worst note in the whole world. I determine is that note. What I can do is either I can slide it up or slide it down 1 fret. A lot of times there will be two good notes in a row, but there's never actually two bad notes in a row. So the note is either going to be in the scale or outside. So again, I'll pop up my track and I'll show you. So I'll hit that really bad note first. Here we go.
1, 2,
Here's
3,
my A.
4.
I'll hit that really funky note. And now I can slide it up or down 1 fret. So I got a safe note here or a safe note here. And here's my bad note. Point is that when I realized that was really freeing for me, because now I can explore all over the neck wherever I want. I don't even have to know what the chord is if I don't want to, but I have that safety of knowing, okay, I can slide my finger up 1 fret or down 1 fret if I ever hit a really bad note. Use that with your ear training, even if you don't know what note it is. If you hit one and you determine, hey, that sounds really bad, that sounds terrible, again, just slide your finger up or down 1 fret really quickly and you'll be on a safe note. Lastly, let's move this back to the key of G, okay?
1, 2,
We're going to start
3,
way up here
4,
on the 12th
1,
fret.
2,
Here we go.
3, 4.
So where would the flatted third be? So we got 1, 2, 3. Where's my flatted third? Flatten it. again, I'm just experimenting and I'm really, again, trying to cue in with my listening and my ear training. How do those notes sound against or underneath with that chord underneath? And that's what I'm really trying to practice for this lesson. You can drill the scales. That'll be good practice as well. But really cue in if you can start hearing those numbers. And what I would also encourage you lastly is, take some of your favorite songs and go through the basic melody and basically figure out the numbers of each note. So why did that melody sound the way it did? A lot of times you're going to figure out the melody is going to be a series of what's called the chord tones. So the 1, 3, and 5 of the scale are the notes that make up the chord. And those are going to be your main melody notes. And then you're going to use a series of passing notes, the 2, 4, 6, and 7. So those are the passing notes. So you got the 1, 3, and 5 are the chord tones. And then you have your passing notes. So a lot of bluegrass and a lot of melodies in general are a series of chord tones. So maybe I start with a chord tone, and then I go up to my next chord tone and walk down with a passing note. So again, it's a series of chord tones, and then passing notes. Again, so if you can remember that you have your 1, 3, and 5, and then you're good at hearing those other chord tones, you're just going to be a lot further along in figuring out your own melodies and figuring out how to improvise. All right, hopefully that gives you some stuff to try. All right, good luck.